I'd like to welcome everybody out to the Life Launch Center's parenting workshop. We really are all about stronger families and stronger futures. And we try to pick topics that are relevant to parenting today and time of year. And we felt like tonight was going to be a kind of a fun topic. We're talking about freedom, and kids want it and how to give it. And that can be kind of a scary thing for a lot of parents. You know, hopefully you want to have more of this from your kids as you give them freedoms, right? And you want to have less of this as you give freedom to your kids. But, you know, before we get too far into it, I want to do just a little bit of introduction. And so just so everybody knows, my name is Joe Newman. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Life Launch Centers. It's an adolescent mental health facility. And we work with kids with depression and anxiety, all sorts of mental health troubles or struggles. And we teach them this resilience model, as you can see here in the background, that is a powerful combination of all sorts of dialectical behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, resilience training. And so that's kind of my background. I have a background in human development and family studies, and this is definitely my passion. I'm a father. You'll probably hear me reference that a lot. I've got 8 kids. I know that's crazy, but it is a lot of fun. Our oldest is 17 and our youngest is 6 or 7 weeks now. So we have a broad spectrum of parenting going on in our house. And I want to introduce Ben Harris and let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Hey, everyone. And thanks for letting me be here, part of this one tonight. Excited to be able to do this. Yeah, I've been around a minute, been in the treatment world as a counselor since 1987. So what's that, 34 years. And been married all of that whole time. My wife's been very grateful that I've been in treatment all that many years, because I think it's made some improvements that may not have shown up without it. But anyway, she's kind of the impetus for a lot of what I do, especially currently. And that's because she kept asking the questions, why do kids have to get in trouble before they get this kind of great training and information? And so excited to be here. I've got 3 kids of my own, 8 grandkids. So in a roundabout way, I've almost kept up with Joe. But the responsibilities of 8,
not a race. I want to make sure everybody knows.
I got to tell you though, 8 grandkids is a lot easier than 8 kids. So the fact that I can shuttle them out the door, you know, what do they say? Grandparents, most exciting day is the day the grandkids show up, and then the next most exciting day is the day they leave. So
gotcha. That's great.
Anyway,
I like that.
Yeah, I love being here. Most of my career has been with adolescents. I've done quite a bit of work with adults, but most of it's been with adolescents, and so certainly a passion of mine.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us tonight and sharing some insights. You've got a lot of great ideas about this. And as we were kind of brainstorming what to talk about, our wheels just were going and going. And it's we hope we've got some real operational things for the parents tonight who's joined us and spent their time with us. We want to really share some like practical things. I don't like just talking about philosophies and ideas, but actual things that we can do. And that's what we hope to share with you tonight. So let's just jump right in. What is freedom? You know, it sometimes looks like this, right? We hope as parents when our kids gain freedoms that they look like this. And we really hope that sometimes those freedoms don't look more like this. And it can kind of be a really scary thing for parents as we're addressing what kinds of freedoms do we give kids at what point in their lives, and how do we encourage it? So Ben, what would you say? Like, how do you address the anxiety parents have that when they give their kids freedoms, whether it's in their teenage years or their later teenage years, that we get, you know, these different results? What do you say? How does that work?
Well, I think, you know, just kind of to start off with, and I think why this question is so important, what is freedom, is, you know, exactly what we're looking at there. Sometimes the idea that we as parents have of freedom is very different than the idea our kids have. And so when our kids are, telling us they need us to give them some freedom, we want to be clear and see if we can't make sure we're on the same page with our kids about what is freedom. And to do that, we as parents need to be sure and clear about what that is, before we can help them be clear about what that is. And I think understanding, I think it was Plato that said, might have been Socrates, one of those great philosophers back in ancient times, says, if I understand the why behind something I need to do, I can move heaven and earth to do it. So really being able to understand, in fact, that'll kind of play into our discussing what freedom is here, that getting away from ignorance allows us to be more effective, allows us to have some freedom.
Well, I love some of the quotes that you came up with, particularly this one here from Robert George. He's a Princeton University professor, speaking about what is freedom. And there's quite a bit to read here, but I've kind of highlighted a couple of the main points here. And that's true freedom consists in the liberation of the human person from the shackles of ignorance, oppression, and vice. And so like what you were saying, how what kids think is freedom, often plays out as, they feel like they want to be able to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And that might actually translate into some vice. And that's, I think, where parents have some apprehension. Like, how do we teach our kids that freedom is actually, amplified through morality, when it's amplified through truth? It says it's grounded in truth and ordered to truth and virtue. The counterfeit of freedom consists in the idea of a personal and communal liberation from morality, responsibility, and truth.
And I love where he goes right after that too. It's what our nation's founders were very concerned about, and they expressly, as he says here, distinguished from liberty and condemned as license, this counterfeit. The so-called freedom celebrated today by so many of our opinion-shaping elites in education, entertainment, and the media is simply the license to do whatever one pleases. That is a counterfeit of real freedom, because it's disordered. It is not, it's detached from morality. It's detached from truth. In fact, the challenge with it is that the shackles, it shackles those in its grip, are no less powerful than the chattel of slavery of old.
And you've been in the addiction recovery industry for years and years and years, and you've seen how when morality is taken out of freedom, what we would say, how that really becomes shackles on a person, in a person's life. What could you say to speak to that?
Well, I think, I heard it put really well one time when somebody said, when you make good choices or right choices that are, morally sound choices, that are choices, based in truth, then you have all the freedom. It's when we begin to make, poor choices, when we start to make choices that go against truth and morality, we start to lose freedom. As we make good choices, all choices are available to us. All options are available to us, including bad ones. But as soon as we start making bad choices, then good choices, and in particular freedoms, when we have to go pay for a ticket, when we have to, maybe go to traffic school, kind of on the light end, on the heavy end, going to jail, going to prison, and having to, deal with, and you're right, Joe, most of my career has been working in the recovery world, helping people with addiction. There is no greater enslavement. In fact, this Professor George here, he finishes it by saying, it's no less tragic. Indeed, it is in certain respects immeasurably more tragic, because the slavery or the bondage associated when we are enslaved to our own appetites and passions, it's almost more tragic because it's self-imposed. In fact, that's the irony in it. That people who celebrate slavery to appetite and passion call that kind of bondage freedom. And so we've kind of kicked that horse a little bit right there. But man, if again we're going to have our kids in front of us saying, "I need freedom," let's make sure we get clear with them about what freedom are they talking about, and be
So,
able to speak wisely with them about that.
so I mean, my mind's just racing over all these experiences with my teenagers. Like, for example, when my son got his driver's license and he got a car, right? And he's just getting this huge set of freedom, right? And as a parent, it's kind of my responsibility to open his mind to the consequences that are going to come with how he chooses to express that freedom. Like speeding, for example. I'm like, all the time, whenever I'm driving with him, I'm like, hey, you want to be really careful driving through this town because the cops are really, really strict and they're going to nail you if you speed through here. But it's your life. You're going to be paying that ticket. You could get your driver's license suspended. And as a parent, I feel like an obligation to kind of explain what the consequences are for whatever they choose with those freedoms, and really hope that they choose the wise way, that they don't have to repeat the mistakes of people who they've seen already experience the difficulties from not choosing the wise way. But how do we do that with, I mean, there's so many big freedoms that we, have to essentially transfer and allow them to use in a healthy way.
Well,
What?
and it's definitely one of the challenges we have just in society in general right now is that in lots of ways, and I know you parents are going to understand exactly what I'm saying and agree with me, is that we give freedom to kids long before their capacity to handle it has been developed. I mean, in lots of ways, we've given them, you know, some
Unfettered
responsibilities. We've
access to
given
the
them,
internet. Unfettered access to the internet is one that popped in my mind. Like,
yeah, the kind of information that is available to kids today is, unmatched by any time any of the rest of us in this Zoom call have experienced. And they're not capable of handling that. In fact, I watched a really great documentary called Social Dilemma. Recommend it to anybody and everybody. Um, I I think it was on Netflix. It might have been on Amazon Prime. Anyway, I think it's on Netflix. Social Dilemma. And one of the things that they brought up was with social media. We're used to in our lives, and it's okay in our lives to be subject to judgment. It's just going to happen because we live in a community.
yeah.
But none of us were built to have hundreds, thousands, even millions of judges.
Yeah.
And
We're
to ask
we're
our kids,
evolutionarily not built to be able to handle the social input of thousands and thousands of people. And that's where
right?
that whole comparison problem comes from. And when it comes to freedoms, like particularly when it comes to internet or social media or phones, I talk to my son, and I've got a 16-year-old daughter too, who, when she has a dumb phone, but sometimes she'll choose to text rather than to call and have a critical conversation. And we've talked about this, like when you have a critical conversation, don't hide behind the anonymity of the digital technology. Like, you got to call and have that critical conversation, because it can get misinterpreted and it can cause more problems. And then when she chooses not to use that freedom responsibly, then we have to, take her phone away to help her recognize she wasn't using that freedom properly. And, at first they're like, that's not fair. Right. I say, well, let me ask you this. What happens if, with your car, if you're driving, if you don't use that freedom appropriately by speeding or, not, running red lights and that kind of things, what do the police do to your freedoms? Those freedoms sometimes are revoked when you choose
We
not
start
to
to
express them.
we start to lose our agency. We start to lose the ability to choose when we can't choose wisely.
So the freedom isn't just unfettered access to be able to do whatever I want without consequence. It's helping our kids understand that the more freedom they have, the more responsibility follows.
Yeah. That's where we're at. And that's our job as parents, is to ask those kind of questions, have those kind of conversations where we're helping them explore what freedom really looks like and how they get it.
Well, and I think a critical thing we remember here in this slide is much like the young, that you've got this little guy and the bigger guy here, that these freedoms it's a growth process, right? Like I sometimes get really frustrated that they're not fully developed adults, even though their body looks like they're an adult now, their mind is not developed and they don't think the way that we do. And they don't even have the actual, that prefrontal cortex isn't developed. So they don't have physically the ability to put logical thought process before emotional impulse. And I have to remind myself that as a parent, not to get too frustrated with my kids, because they really are trying to do the best they can with this, the smaller amount of development that they're at, that stage that they're at.
And it's so important to understand that they're going to have more freedom in their life as their capacity to make decisions grows. And to increase in capacity means pain. I mean, to put it simply, they're going to have to experience discomfort. Like this picture here, if we're going to build muscle, the only way muscle grows is if we tear it,
Right.
actually damage it, because then it comes back and it heals it, it repairs it, and it repairs it in a way that can handle, more weight or greater resistance. And so in our lives, our capacity to be able to do more things has come at a cost. We've had to pay a price for that capacity. Our kids have to pay that price. And one of the biggest things that we do as parents that gets in the way of them growing in their capacity is to enable. And essentially that's us running in and solving problems for them. Their ability to problem solve is going to be one of the greatest key points of freedom in their life. The only way they learn how to problem solve is if we let them solve problems. So when there's a challenge at school, they've gotten a grade they didn't think they deserved, the worst thing we as a parent can do is call that teacher. Let them work that out. You can sit down and talk through it with them, maybe role play a little bit, have them go through some of what they might say or some of the questions they might ask. But don't get on that phone and call that teacher and talk to them about it. Make them do that. Let them do that. That's when they learn and grow. That's when their capacity increases.
I think about this picture here with this little guy and the bigger guy. If the bigger guy was the parent and figuratively they were, working out, maybe a bench press or doing something like that. And every time this little guy was struggling, the bigger guy said, "Here, let me help you." And he lifts up the bar, right? What does that do to the little guy? It robs him of the opportunity to stretch those muscles, to push their capacity and to grow. And it's painful though. I have to empathize, like with all the parents out there. It is so painful to watch your kids struggle and struggle. It's just like a natural instinct for us to want to jump in there and make it easier.
Well, especially when it's really painful and you can see that it's painful. You're right. Your natural instinct is to jump in and take away that pain. And there are times when that's appropriate. Don't get me wrong. It's not like we just, shrug them off and say, "Hey, sink or swim. I don't care what you do." We do care what they do. We do care if they swim. We don't want them sinking. But we do have a tendency as parents to run in and rescue them early. But let me share with you a little insight on that one. And it's hard to hear because it's a bit of an indictment. And I'm as guilty as anyone, but enabling is the counterfeit of love. And I'm talking about that love that a parent has for a child. Love is really about selflessness and sacrifice and being able to and being willing to experience difficult things because it's best for our child.
Yeah.
So to watch them struggle and to go through that difficulty to feel that pain, to have to resist that urge to run in there and save them from this hard time. We're willing to do that because it's best for them. When we run in and save them, it looks like love. That's why I call it the counterfeit, because it looks like love, but love is selfless. Enabling is self-centered, because the reason why we're running in to rescue them isn't because it's what's best for them or good for them even. It's so that we can get rid of the uncomfortable feeling we have, to alleviate the discomfort. That's why we run in. And so really it's not about them, it's about me and my level of comfort.
And honestly, that's a totally normal thing, because we as a living organism are designed to avoid difficult situations, painful situations. You know, we naturally want to choose the easier route. And that's where it becomes such a challenge as parents to recognize, I love my child, therefore I'm going to suffer with them through this hard thing rather than spare us both this difficulty. And
Well, and it's even taking, that extra time sometimes that you don't feel like you have to teach. It's just easier for me to go ahead and load the dishwasher myself, because I know I can get all those dishes in that sink in that dishwasher. And instead of teaching my kids how to do that so they can do it on their own later, I just let them run off and go play with their friends. And because I don't, one, want to argue with them about it, and two, it's just faster for me to do it. Well, that's all true, but I have to remember, what am I doing? Am I washing dishes or raising kids?
yeah,
If the lawn needs to be mowed, I know some of you saw that Green and Clean. There's a really great video on YouTube called Green and Clean by Stephen Covey, and he asked the question, am I raising grass or boys? And so the opportunity to teach sometimes is inconvenient and uncomfortable, and sometimes even painful. But if I love my child, that's what I will do. If I'm going to enable my child to take care of my own comfort, then I'll run in and take care of those things for them.
I've got to totally throw myself and my family under the bus here, because like it's constant reminder, my wife and I support each other in helping remind us, when the toy room's messy, right? It's just like, man, we can go in there and clean that up in 5 minutes and it'll be done. Or we're going to have to babysit and nudge and encourage our three littlest to clean up after themselves. But ultimately, what are we trying to accomplish? We want them to achieve a level of cleanliness and organization and learn the principles of cleaning up after themselves. And it's harder at the beginning, at least. That's the best part, I think, about taking the time that you're talking about to do the harder thing, is that it's more investment up front, but later on it pays dividends, like huge dividends.
Yep. So we've got to figure out how to do that. We got to figure out how to one, motivate them. That's probably one of the most difficult things we as parents start to experience. And I think our next slide starts to talk about that. And that is shifting the locus of control from external to internal. And when we're talking about locus of control, I know that's probably a new term or concept to a lot of people. But locus of control is really, and you can kind of read that while I'm talking, but locus of control is really about, where do I get my motivation from? Do I feel like I have control over the outcome, or do I feel or believe that I'm simply in the hands of outside forces? And this is a really important concept and principle to teach. It's certainly something that even each of us as adults can learn. Our society is not built to have us keep the locus of control internal, where we have control over the outcome. Our society really wants us to have an external locus of control,
To be the
because
victim.
it allows, say that again?
To be the victim and to, label and put things that are, make it so that, it's beyond our control. I hear that. Entitlements, that kind of plays into it too. I just hear a lot of discussion around today. Well, we can't really change this because of this or this or this, where, having an internal locus of control, having the realization that, I'm motivated to do this thing because it's not an external reward, but this is something that I want and I'm willing to sacrifice for it. Is that kind of what you're
Right.
talking about?
Yeah, and I've got a little story that I want to share with you that'll help kind of illustrate this. So, for quite a few years, I worked in a wilderness program over in Wayne County, out there around Fish Lake and Boulder Mountain and Capitol Reef National Park. What a powerful experience! But the crowning moment of the years that I spent there was, we had a team. We had 3 staff and 11 kids, and they were up on the east end of the Boulder Mountain. And it was October, starting to snow, get pretty cold, and it was time to move them down into the desert out between the Henry Mountains and Capitol Reef National Park. And the way we would do that is we'd, take Suburbans up and load the kids and the staff up and all their gear and everything and drive them out to the desert. Well, we got a radio call from the staff telling us that they had been talking with the kids, this particular team on the east end of the Boulder, that they wanted to hike it. They wanted to hike from the east end of the boulders all the way down into Capitol Reef through Capitol Reef National Park and up into the desert there in front of the Henry Mountains. Well, that's quite a hike. It was about 25 miles, a lot of rappelling and climbing, and it was going to be a tough hike. And we asked them, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Yep, we're very motivated. We're ready to go. We've helped the kids understand that we have to complete the hike because you can't camp in Capitol Reef National Park." And so
you're not allowed to sleep overnight in Capitol Reef. Is that?
No, you can't build a fire there. You can't set up camp. You can't, any of those things in Capitol Reef National Park. So they were going to have to get all the way through this hike before they could settle down. Well, it went really well until the evening, and they had gotten through really the hardest parts, had come up out of the park, and we're kind of on this flat, but they could see the Henry Mountains were still miles away. And one boy threw his pack off and he said, I'm sick and tired of hiking. And the staff said, "That's fine. We can rest, but we can't camp. We are still in the park. We can't camp. We can't build a fire. Our food isn't here. It's, once we get out of the park, we'll be able to get our food. We can't, roll out the sleeping bags. We can't do any of that stuff, but we can rest." Well, the kids all then said, "Yep, let's rest." They sat there all night. The staff stayed awake with those kids all night, making sure nobody went to sleep, making sure that, they didn't do anything they weren't supposed to do. Well, as the sun started coming up in the morning, the same kid said, "I am sick of sitting here. Let's go." And he was kind of an alpha in that group. And so the other kids started picking up their packs and said, "Yeah, we're ready. Let's go." And the staff asked him, "Are you sure we're going to finish this hike?" And the kids said, "Yeah, whatever, let's go." So they started hiking. They hiked about 150 yards and went through a little break in the fence. And as they got to the other side, the staff threw their packs off their back. And the kids looked at them really strangely. And the staff said, "We're out of the park. We can camp now." When that story came back to me, I was kind of rocked, because here were 3 staff that sat out in that cold all night. They were hungry, uncomfortable, and they knew, because they could see the fence, they knew all night they were 150 yards away from the end of their hike. And what was impressive to me is how easy it would have been to tell those kids, because if they told the kids that fence right there is the end of our hike, the kids would have sprinted the rest of that. There wouldn't have been any issue. But here's where we start talking about locus of control. So the motivation to finish that hike would have been based on the staff telling them where the end of the hike was. What we want the kids to have been able to do is finish that hike because that's what they committed to do, instead of because it's only 150 yards away. The trouble with locus of control being external is that external things change and we have no control over it. If we can move that locus of control or the motivation to being an internal motivation or internal locus of control, then we get to decide what happens. Yeah, there's going to be things that we can't control in all parts of our life, but we then have the ability to control how we respond to those things, as opposed to waiting for something external to take care of us, something external to motivate us, something external to tell us where we are or how we're measuring up or any of those things. So we want to help our kids shift that locus of control from external to internal. And that's something we're going to have to help them with, because society won't.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the big question is how do you get your kid? I mean, because I'm thinking about how often I use, you know, treats and all sorts of external motivators for my kids to, you know, do their chores or be obedient or whatever, right? It's like bribe your kids. That's how you get them to do something. How do you shift that locus of control to their internal?
Right, because when you're talking about bribery, when you're talking about pay, I mean, when I go to work, I get paid, and that's a nice external motivator for me. But something could happen to that. So I've got to find a way to, love my work, to do something I really love to do, so that there's some internal motivation. So when I'm waking up in the morning and putting both feet on the floor, my first thought isn't, I just want to go back to bed. Hopefully, quickly in the morning, I'm thinking, yeah, I can hardly wait to get to work because I got these really great things I'm working on and I want to continue to do that. But really, it all ends up being based in connection, based in relationships. And a big responsibility that we have as parents is to build relationships with our kids,
Yeah.
and help them learn how to connect and build relationships.
So that
And
kind of
we do
goes to
that.
our next slide. Because when I think about, why it's important to build a relationship and how to get that that internal locus of control. For us, it comes through teaching truth. If my kids don't understand some reason why they need to clean up their toys before dinner, right? Like this is a common thing. We made a rule that we want to have the basement cleaned up, that the toy room is cleaned before we have dinner. Why should they care about it? Well, then I have to teach them the values of cleanliness. I have to teach them the truth that has benefited our lives and the reason why I'm trying to share that with them. But honestly, you can teach and preach and lecture and as much as you want all day long. But like you're saying, if you don't have the relationship with them, if you don't truly know them, then they're not really going to have a whole lot of, motivation to want to listen to the truth that you're trying to share them. So what do you mean here with not just knowing them, but knowing about them is key?
Well, a lot of times we as parents, we feel like we really know our kids. We know how they're going to respond in certain situations. We know what they think, and we know a lot about them. But I'll tell you, as a parent of adult children, and let me warn you, raising adult children is definitely harder than raising children.
I
Uh,
keep hearing that, and it's like, oh man. I try to listen to the wisdom of those who've gone before me and prepare because yeah, I know it's
well,
part of
we
life.
we lose some influence. Certainly, I think the better the relationship has been all along, the more influence you maintain as they're in adulthood. But you lose some influence, and the decisions they make are much bigger and have much bigger consequences than the decisions they're making when they're living in your home, and you certainly have less control. But the way we build that relationship is by talking, by spending time together. For most kids, one of their most powerful love languages, and they'll shift a little bit. All of our love language will shift a little bit as we grow and parts of our life change and shift around. But one of the most important love languages for kids is quality time together. And so we've got to take advantage of times when we are together, like sitting around the dinner table. there are research studies end over end that talk about one of the biggest things missing in our society right now that has created success in families, in relationships, is we don't eat dinner together anymore. And now there's definitely going to be some legitimate reasons why maybe we can't gather everybody around. We are such a busy society, but we've got to find time and place where we can get together. And then we create conversation. One of the best ways to help our kids understand the value of some of these things we've been talking about tonight is to help them discover it by asking them good questions. Ask them questions that help them value or evaluate their life. And they're not, you have to be careful not to answer or ask yes or no questions. Ask questions that mean they're going to have to talk, mean they're going to have to come back with some responses. And then be patient. One of the most important things about asking a question is after you ask it, be quiet.
Be patient.
Let them answer the question. We get so uncomfortable with silence that we hurry and jump in there and we start suggesting answers for them, which allows them to just say, oh yeah, that's it, instead of really having to dig down in. Now, sometimes we might have to prime the pump by sharing an experience of our own. If they see us share some experiences, if we can go back to those questions for a second, if we could share some of our own answers to these questions, what was something interesting, fun, difficult, whatever that you did today, and you don't get any answers, well, come up with one of your own. Well, here's what I did. But then come back to, don't let them off the hook. Create that expectation that when we're, sitting here together doing this activity or having dinner or whatever it is, everybody's expected to talk through some of this stuff. What's on your mind today? Joe, you were talking earlier about some how much questions.
Yeah, or most questions. I got to give
most questions.
I got to give a plug just for this whole thing, because family dinner is a battle sometimes with schedules. I've got a couple of kids in high school, a couple in middle school. You've got piano lessons, you've got football, you've got dance, you've got all this stuff. But what we've found that works as a family is that we've set a time, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock is dinner time at the Newman household, and whoever's there gets to be a part of it. And sometimes friends are over and it's dinner time and it's like, hey, 6 o'clock, you guys want to join us for dinner? And they'll get to join in. And it's interesting how we do practice this, actually. I'll ask the kids, like, how was your day? And I'll usually pick one or two of them specifically and ask them, how was your day? And at first I would get the response, good. That was it. Right. And I realized, okay, when I ask the question, how was your day? I'm really asking, why don't you tell me about your day? Rather than just wanting a one-word answer. Right. So we had a discussion about, okay, when somebody asks you how your day was, you want to kind of give them like a brief synopsis, maybe some good things, maybe some not so good things, and really just kind of tell them about, you give them some insight to what your day was like. And it's become like something the kids look forward to. And it's like they almost hope that it's their turn, that dad's going to call on them to say, tell the family how their day was. And in fact, if I don't initiate that conversation after everybody's dished up the food, then usually one of my little guys, like my little 3-year-old, he's so cute. He'll turn to me and be like, Dad, how was your day? And this little 3-year-old, and I'm like, it was great, buddy. Let me tell you about it. I sent some emails, I had lunch at Cafe Rio, and then he'll be like, yeah, it's great. And that just like you're saying, it really starts that conversation and connection because we're sharing with each other. And
if we can get to some specific questions, that helps alleviate maybe that big, huge, broad question, how was your day? Oh, it was good. Well, so what was the most interesting thing that happened in your day today?
Yeah.
I love this one here, number 4. Can I tell you about something crazy that happened to me today?
Yeah.
The next one, what are the things you're grateful for today?
You alluded to the most questions too. This is a great concept that is really powerful, and you kind of have to be a little creative, but you come up with like, hey, tell me about a time that you were most cold, experience that you were colder than you've ever been before, or when you were most hungry, or when you were most embarrassed, or tell me about the time you were most alone, and
or most proud, or the most excited, or
yeah, that can be a really powerful exercise just to get conversation. And ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to not just know them, but really know about them, right? Just like we do with other interactions or relationships. When you're trying to get to know somebody, those are the kind of questions that you ask them.
Yeah, ask them about their friends. Ask them about their work and their coworkers, and ask them all about that so that you know about them as much as you know them.
And the connection there is when you know about them as well as knowing them, just to kind of take us back through this, then we're able to help build a relationship that we can have conversations about stuff like locus of control, and about, enabling and limits and growth, and expressing our confidence in them. Because we know them better, when we express confidence in them, it sinks in deeper because they trust us more because they know us better, right?
Well,
And
and as they trust us, they recognize we start to trust them, and it's in those moments that their capacity increases. Again, this all goes back to the number one goal here for us as parents is to help them develop the capacity to be successful, productive, happy adults. But they have to have the capacity to do it. If you hand the keys to your car to your 8-year-old and ask them to run down to the store and get some milk, we're going to have a problem. So we can't send these young adults out our doors without the capacity to be adults in this world. And the development of that capacity is going to happen around the dinner table. It's going to happen in those moments when you get to talk with them and help them learn, help them evaluate, help them, understand their own values, and to let them problem solve, let them struggle. They've got to learn how to struggle, and they only do that by struggling.
and you express your confidence in them. Like I still love that picture of the little guy and the bigger guy there, because so often I think I'm guilty of looking at even my teenage kids and seeing them as they're 5 years old still physically, and it's like, I don't think he can really handle this. And I kind of, place limits on my kids sometimes. And I have to remind myself regularly, my son's almost 17. Or no, he is 17. He's almost 18. He's like 1 year from being an adult, right? And I've got to get really good at expressing my confidence in him so that he knows that dad's rooting for him, and he's going to push and push and push on those bars, the muscles to build that resilience and to build the ability to exercise these freedoms properly. And because I'm his cheerleader, because I know him, he will thrive. He won't be like flawless. He's going to make mistakes, right? Like, you can't expect him to be perfect. In fact, you don't want him to, because then they don't actually build resilience. Like, they have to go through the hard stuff. But I have to get out of the way as a parent, stop lifting up the bar so that they don't actually get the chance to exercise, quit enabling.
Yeah, when my kids turned 18, it was one of the funnest conversations I ever had with them, because I let them know, okay, today you're 18 and nothing in your life changes except you can go to prison, you can be drafted to war, and you can vote. So just understand that hopefully all those things you've learned over these years about making decisions are going to help you deal with the new consequences that have now entered your life because you're 18.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great perspective, because you're right. Like the drinking limit and all these other things that people perceive as freedoms, come with a whole lot of consequence. And so it's kind of wise that, it's disseminated gradually, and they recognize the great consequences that come with every freedom that they want to exercise. So, well, it's been I think a very productive conversation. I hope we've all had an opportunity to self-reflect a little bit and see, okay, how can I put this into practice? How can I use, these tools of not enabling, of becoming their cheerleader, of getting to know them better, to build that relationship, to be able to teach truth so that they receive it better. Again, I'm self-convicting here. I think I try to go to teach truth a lot faster than I try to go to build relationships, build connections. And I see how that backfires in my parenting. And that's a great reminder for us. So thank you, Ben, for these awesome insights.
Thanks.
Well, we're finishing it up, and just wanted to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Again, Life Launch Centers, we really are all about stronger families, stronger futures, trying to help families deal with the mental health crisis that is going on today, and giving them the tools to help build resilience, to help deal with the anxiety, the depression, all the things that seem to be really overtaking our families. And so if you have any questions about that, don't hesitate. Our website has a lot of resources on there, and all like an explanation of the entire resilience model and the steps in it. There's podcasts. So please don't hesitate. Give us a call. If you've got some specific questions that you want help with, please feel free to give us a call. We're always happy to talk and pass along some great resources. So again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. And we do this every month. We hope you'll be back next month and for our next parenting workshop. And it's been great being with you. Thanks so much.